Greetings and welcome once again to Sonic Odyssey, the music video channel dedicated to bring you the last 5 decades or so of music in review and discussion format. Before we dive into today's music, let's get the housekeeping out of the way. The usual applies. You should know it by now. Please click the thumbs up button if you like the video. You can also click the share button to share through social media networks such as Facebook and Twitter. And also consider subscribing to the channel. And if you subscribe, maybe even click the little bell icon that appears. And that way each time I post a new video, you'll be notified that I have done so. Lastly, I would ask you to consider visiting my Patreon page. There's a link in the show description below the video. And you can go there and take a look at the different tiers that are available if you'd like to consider contributing to the channel and keeping the channel going. That would be greatly appreciated, and your patronage would be most wonderfully appreciated. So I thank you in advance for even considering it. And that's the housekeeping out of the way. So today we're going to be looking at and listening to some of the most important music in the genre of progressive rock. The band is King Crimson, and the album is 1969's pioneering, monumental influencer of music still to this day, the album In the Court of the Crimson King, an observation by King Crimson. First, a little bit of history about the band. The band was formed in 1969, and it came out of earlier bands. Most notably, Robert Fripp had been a part of a band entitled Giles and Fripp, which was a psychedelic rock group, but they had really no success, and this led to guitarist Robert Fripp being kind of frustrated and deciding to try and get a new direction going, which led to the formation of King Crimson. This first iteration of King Crimson took the form of Robert Fripp on guitars and acoustic and electric guitars and production, Michael Giles on drums and percussion, as well as backing vocals and production, Greg Lake on lead vocals, bass guitar, and production, Ian MacDonald on saxophone, flute, bass clarinet, mellotron, harpsichord, piano, organ, vibraphone, and backing vocals, with Peter Seinfeld providing lyrics, stage lighting, and also delving into the production end of the album. The album was released in 1969 on October 10th and reached number 5 on the UK charts and number 28 in the US charts. The album contains only 5 songs and clocks in at roughly 44 minutes. 2 singles were released from the album. The first was released in October of 1969, and that was the song In the Court of the Crimson King. And the second single was the song Epitaph, backed by 21st Century Schizoid Man, which was released many years later in 1976. In the Court of the Crimson King is to this day considered the progenitor of progressive rock for taking elements of mainstream rock and combining them with elements from classical music, jazz, folk, psychedelic rock, and fusion. This groundbreaking album would and still continues to influence music and artists across genres and spectrums of all music, with bands from the 1970s through the 2020s still citing the album In the Court of the Crimson King as one of their influences. Oddly enough, the lineup which created this monumental and astonishing piece of important historic music pretty much dissolved before 1970. leaving only Robert Fripp as the glue to hold the band together. The band carries on to this day, though in a highly different form than when they formed originally in 1969. Greg Lake would go on to form Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Ian MacDonald would co-create the pop sensation Foreigner, and Michael Giles would go on to become a very in-demand session drummer and contributed to a number of artists' and bands' recordings over the years. But enough backstory, let's get to a little bit of what makes this album so influential, with a bit of music taken from the album's opening track, and that is 21st Century Schizoid Man. So here's a brief listen to some of that. The frenzy of sounds in this sample are the foundation of which dozens upon dozens of individuals and artists and groups have drawn inspiration over the years. You have the wild rhythmic bass of Greg Lake just going all over the place. You have the soaring freedom of Robert Fripp's guitar work and the frantic but controlled rhythm section of the drums, and the work of Ian MacDonald on the mellotron and the piano and the woodwinds, just providing a tremendous soundscape. 21st Century Schizoid Man is the only song of the 5 of the album to demonstrate this type of musical progression, but that doesn't in any way diminish the rest of the album in any fashion. The impact of the other tracks is still quite important. The second track is a slow-paced affair entitled I Talk to the Wind, and this features probably one of Greg Lake's really best vocal performances. It's a beautiful song, and lyricist Seinfeld has said of this song, even decades later, that it remains his favorite personal song, his favorite lyric piece that he's done of all the works that he's written. It's a mellow song with flute and bass playfully moving through the background of the music while Greg Lake sings just beautifully over the top. The third track is a song entitled Epitaph, and it's also a bit sedate, but much more mid-tempo than I Talk to the Wind. It gives a little bit more of a slightly progressive sound to it, and we're going to take a little bit of a listen to that song for the milder side of King Crimson circa 1969.
If we make it
The mellotron has a prominent role here, as does the free-flowing playing of Lake's bass lines. The song is a tad on the depressive side lyrically, but it's majestically presented and certainly worth being released as a single, as it was many years after the album had been released. The fourth track, Moonchild, continues the mid-tempo, milder styling of the band with a lot of the progressive elements there. However, it is probably the only track worthy of critique on the album, as it does clock in at around 12 minutes, and quite possibly 4 minutes of that could have been shaved off and made the song tighter and better song. It has a lot of instrumental passages which sometimes become a tad repetitive and seem uninspired, and that's really the only downside. There is some originality and creativity in the instrumental parts, but it's just a little bit dragging and could have done with a little bit of snipping on the editing board. However, it's the album closer that probably most people are familiar with, and that is, of course, In the Court of the Crimson King. And this is a song that more than a dozen artists have covered over the years in recordings. It's been recorded by heavy metal, new wave of British heavy metal band Saxon on one of their releases, as well as Polish prog rock band Lizard, and a number of other artists. Asia has recorded a copy of it. This song had originally been written by MacDonald and Seinfeld for an earlier project, but it was refashioned and retooled for King Crimson's debut release. In its original form, it was actually a country and western piece, but obviously it's been radically changed to the song that we know today. It's a shame that this lineup of musicians broke apart so shortly after achieving such tremendous success, and not knowing how impactful and influential their album would be and remains to be to this day, because who knows what they could have done had they stayed together as the band. But it's the only original King Crimson album. All the others that have come after have been maintained under the firm grip of Robert Fripp. He's the glue that holds the band together. Currently, the lineup is, I think, 8 players with, believe it or not, 3 drummers taking center stage. There are 3 drum kits. It's really an interesting mix, and I think Tony Levin is still on bass and stick. So there are, and you'll forgive me on not remembering the names of the other current lineup, but they do still perform, and in fact released a live album just this year of a concert they performed just this year. So there's still a going concern, and going back to 1969's In the Court of the Crimson King, I have to give the album easily 4.5 out of 5 stars. I almost want to give it 5, but Moonchild, the 4th track, just takes away from the perfection of the album, and it really could have used a little bit of editing or editorial control in that stage. But otherwise, I think that In the Court of the Crimson King is certainly one of the best rock, progressive rock albums ever to have been released. It's certainly the progenitor, the originator of the genre, and it's a fantastic piece to listen to from beginning to end, even with Moonchild sometimes dragging along a little bit. It's got just such beautiful musicianship throughout. All of the instrumental passages showcase the wonderful abilities of Giles and Lake and Fripp and MacDonald. They really do marvelous work. Some of the recording of the album required multiple layering, sometimes more than 5 or 6 times over a single track, trying just to get the sound that they wanted on the album. And they succeeded. It's a brilliant piece. So I highly recommend that you check out, if you've not done it already, In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson from 1969. It's been certified gold, and it is definitely worth your time and attention. And I thank you for your time and attention, and I appreciate your watching the video. Please remember to like the video, share, and subscribe, and consider visiting the Patreon page. And until next time, I wish you peace, happiness, and a good holiday season, and a happy new year. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.